A man from my church began to molest me. It began when I was about 8. And it continued up until, I believe, about 11 and a half. And this man, he masqueraded as a happy and well-adjusted man within the church that I went to. And then after church, I would run to my car where I'd do a little cocaine and then go down and see my stripper girlfriend. And I worked in strip joints as a doorman and a bouncer. And then along with my girlfriend, we became involved in the pornography industry.
Welcome to Pure Passion. My name is Jason Graves, and I'm your host for today's program. As you probably already know, addiction to pornography is one of the greatest problems in the world today. Even women are falling victim to its siren song, having become the fastest growing segment of the porn-using community. Most people who use pornography don't see it as a problem either. They've never really considered the full ramifications of what they're doing. The porn industry has done an excellent job at spinning porn use as a matter of freedom of speech. They decry anyone who would presume to tell people what they can do in the privacy of their own homes. All the while, they're wreaking havoc in the lives of those who are used in pornographic films. Yes, they're using your dollars to destroy people's lives. Have you ever wondered what must have happened to those who appear in pornographic films that they would even consider being in one? Well, on today's program, we have a guest who will tell you. David Zahler was once an actor in porn films, and what he has to tell you about what really happens to those who are used by such filmmakers should open your eyes wide enough that using porn will never again be an option in your life. If love for God won't prevent you from watching pornography, perhaps a look into the destructive forces that are used against the children, teenagers, and young adults found in such films, magazines, and websites will prick your conscience enough to persuade you to say no to this evil empire.
I think that my deviation from a happy, what could be considered a normal childhood, was when a man from my church began to molest me. It began when I was about 8, and it continued up until, I believe, about 11 and a half. And it was about that same time that I discovered my father's pornography collection. And I remember as I looked at this pornography and I would see the images of these people having sex, I would try to reconcile with what I saw with what was happening to me in my real life. And I would look, and yet there was no reconciling it. And I'm not sure which was more damaging to me, whether the actual molestation or knowing that while my father was sleeping with my mother, that he was having these affairs through his use of pornography. You know, I can remember as I had grown up a little older, early adolescence, the sexual abuse had stopped. I was old enough and strong enough and mature enough to have put an end to that and separate myself from this man that had been hurting me. But I was also very active in my church, and my church was the environment where this man had gained access to me. And so I can remember feeling this great conflict between what I heard at church, that God loved me and God loved all the little children, and yet it was also the environment that brought this horrible pain into my life. And I can remember sitting on my bed reading my Bible, because that's what I'd been told I was supposed to do. And as I read my Bible, and I would pray that somehow, some way, God would make something useful of my life. And God was silent to me at that time. I grew up in a very sad and dysfunctional family. I was a boy really left without protection by his own family. Not because they were bad, it's just that they just didn't have the emotional and mental resources to notice how vulnerable their children were. And this man, he masqueraded as a happy and well-adjusted man within the church that I went to. He was a great actor. And, I've learned that I don't need to judge this man anymore. That's God's job. I don't know what happened to him to make him the way he was. I remember that there was a time where I would think that if I could ever get away with it, and that I wouldn't get caught, that I would kill this man and never blink an eye. Now, I know the man's not alive today. He's, I was a little boy at the time, so he has since died of natural causes. But if he was still alive and I'd see him today, I would not harm him. He certainly wouldn't be my friend, and I certainly would confront him. But he has to face his God, just like I do. I don't think I told my family because my family was all about secrets. My father's porn addiction. We had generational layers of really very sad, lonely, desperate secrets going back generations. We didn't talk about what was really going on with us as individuals. We would find someone else to pin the blame on, so to speak. There was something imposed on me, and that was a belief that I needed to handle this by myself. That if I asked for help, the help would not be there. Being molested by a man for me did create great confusion. I remember early adolescence seeing men just express normal affection for one another, maybe a hug or an endearing handshake, and even that was very threatening to me. I knew on the one hand that I really, really liked girls, but I was so frightened from them. I was frightened of them, and I felt guilty about how I felt towards them. I knew that I didn't want to have anything to do with homosexuals, and yet I was afraid that homosexual people were everywhere. And so I was alone. I was stuck. On the one hand, I was fairly certain of my physiology and of the direction of my passion as a growing, healthy young man who was attracted to women, but I didn't know how to communicate that. I didn't know how to express that. And so I was kind of caught up in a no man's land of spiritual and sexual development. I think without knowing it, I was caught up in a longing for God and a deep distrust of God. Certainly I had been ingrained with the belief that I was supposed to be a good, godly man. Yet I didn't know exactly what that meant. I had a deep longing that I could never quite express, never quite get my hands around. I could never quite define it. I didn't know where to put it. And I would go through periods where I was intensely seeking spiritual things through reading my Bible and attending church religiously. I was taught that church is where the good people went, and if you wanted to be a good person, you're supposed to go to church. So that's what I did. I'd go to church. I wanted to be a good person. In fact, as an adult, before my moment with God, there was a period of time where I would generally go to church on Saturday nights because I knew I'd never get there on Sunday because I'd be too hungover. And so what I would do is I would go to church, I'd stop by a coffee shop, I'd get me a cup of coffee, but I'd pour the coffee out, and I'd fill the cup full of vodka. And I'd go sit on the back row of church sipping my coffee because the vodka in my coffee cup helped me get through church. And then after church, I would run to my car where I'd do a little cocaine and then go down and see my stripper girlfriend. And I would talk to her about what the preacher had talked about at church, somehow or another trying to reconcile the religiosity of which I was raised in and the reality of my life as it was that day.
Your passion that beats for Christ alone.
As I got older, and I moved away from just looking at pornography and found myself dating dancers in strip joints, and I worked in strip joints as a doorman and a bouncer. And then along with my girlfriend, we became involved in the pornography industry. And by that time, I had a pretty nasty little drug and alcohol habit. And so this is how we made our money to live and to get our drugs. And I've come to think of pornography like a drug. Now, I am a recovering alcoholic, and I'm a recovering drug addict. I used to smoke my crack, and I would drink my alcohol, and I would take the pills and do whatever to get that stuff into my body. Well, the pornography, I just ingested through my eyes. But I believe at the brain chemistry level, and even at the level of our cells in our bodies, that pornography has a drug-like effect. And people are very capable of becoming addicted to pornography, just like they're capable of becoming addicted to drugs. And I don't believe that anyone is immune to that. The most honest prayer I've ever prayed in my life was when I looked up at the stars one night, and I said, God, I don't know who you are. But if you don't help me, I'm going to die. I'll call you any name you want. I was willing to become a Buddhist or a Muslim, Hindu. I would have been anything. I just didn't want to die. And a few minutes later, standing there in the cold as my hands shook trying to light a cigarette, I believe that I heard a voice. Now, I don't know if I heard the voice through my ears audibly or heard it just resonating in my heart. But this voice that I heard said to me, all right, David, now I can go to work. And I was stunned. I was floored. First of all, that I had called out to a God, and for the first time in my life, God responded by calling me by my name. He wasn't telling me to go to do something. He wasn't telling me to walk down the aisle or fill out a card to go knock on somebody's door and tell them about church. He just said, all right, David. He called me by name. And I didn't know exactly who that was. And I've come to realize and really appreciate the humility of God. And that in that moment, he let me know that he loved me and he didn't expect me to figure him out. He didn't expect me to have my theology right or my doctrine right. He just wanted me to know that he was there. And over time, I've become to realize that my previous life where I longed and waited for that time was just simple preparation. He wasn't holding out on me. He was allowing me to be prepared. I believe that being a healthy human being requires that we have what I call a binocular view of life. I'm a sportsman. I like to be outside, and I have a pair of binoculars. And each eye looks through a different lens. But they bring you into focus. And I think God wanted me to have the experience of that 40 years. I was 40 years old when I prayed that prayer. Of having that 40 years of indescribable aloneness. In order so that when he came and met me and gave me a growing and developing vision for the future that he would give me, that would bring me into focus on how I was supposed to live today. And it's been that focus that has changed me and has empowered me, not easily and not without pain, but to become the kind of person where my involvement in drugs and alcohol and pornography just don't make sense anymore. Now, I've never forgotten how much I love to be high. I've never forgotten how much I love to be drunk or the thrill of my promiscuous lifestyle. But it doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. I have a life that's worth living now. My life on the surface really hasn't changed a whole lot. I still live in the same house, same neighborhood. I have less money today than I had when I did drugs. I certainly have not gotten the life that I had defined for myself. But what I have come to understand is what it means to live with the indwelling presence of the Creator. I am perfectly at home in this universe, whether it be in this body or in eternity. Heaven for me has already started, not because my life is so great. My streets that I walk on are certainly not paved with gold. But the everlasting love of God is mine. God's commands and his call to obedience is not some sort of arbitrary list of do's and don'ts. It's because he's asking me to do and live my life in such a way that is good for me and good for others. And that this life I experience, I have, and even though I am obviously well entrenched and middle-aged, but my life is expanding, it's growing. And that's a great thing, because prior to, my life was always this desperate struggle to survive. Because it wasn't a life, it was just a death where my heart hadn't stopped beating yet.
Pure passion that beats for Christ alone. Pure passion.
Have you ever wondered why God has allowed you to go through the things you have in life? Did it ever occur to you that there's a purpose to that and that he wants to redeem the experiences and pain you've endured in a way that uses your gifts, talents, and passions? Well, he definitely does. And when he does that in a believer's life, we call that a redemptive vision. It's beyond what you're recovering from, and it's all about that which you're recovering to. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? Well, I can tell you from my own personal experience, it's not only exciting to be living out my own redemptive vision in my own ministry to the sexually broken, but that it's also very fulfilling, and it can be for you too, however that looks, unique to you as an individual. I'd like to explore that with you a little bit and provide some insights to consider that can open the doorways to the next level of your recovery, whether you're dealing with sexual brokenness yourself or in the life of a loved one, or if you feel personally called to this kind of redemptive ministering yourself, directly or indirectly. The bottom line is, as the Bible puts it, where there is no vision, the people perish. So, if we fail to consider and move into this, it not only has consequences for others around us, but at the very least, it leads to an incomplete recovery on a personal level. And in this way, we remain vulnerable to returning to the very things that got us into those places we've been in the very first place. As Dr. Miles Monroe says, vision is foresight with insight based on hindsight. Similarly, Andy Stanley puts it this way: God is using your circumstances to position and prepare you to accomplish his vision for your life. In other words, God wants to redeem the places we've been in life through us for the good of his people, to the glory of his name. Scripture confirms this too. Remember the verse, his strengths are made perfect in our weaknesses? Now, if you're anything like me, you may be thinking, well, sounds great, but easier said than done. Well, I understand. When I first considered stepping into sexual integrity ministry, I was terrified and actually avoided God, refusing to follow his lead. I was afraid of being judged. I was fearful that there wouldn't be enough work for me as a therapist. Pretty funny when I look back that I could think something like that when there are so many hurting people out there. I was just so blinded by my own fear and selfishness. My immaturity was limiting how much God could do through me to set the captives free. Can you relate with feeling afraid? Well, once I started to obey, God opened up so many opportunities for me. He's really blessed the things I've tried to do that are of him, and he's used my gifts in a way I can be proud of. These days, my fears seem to be drowned out by the feelings of affirmation, confidence, and joy from the Lord as a result of this redemptive partnership we've formed together. It's almost as though life seems richer, and I enjoy each day in newer and greater ways. I could go on, but let me point out a few things to consider for yourself wherever you're at in the redemptive vision process. First, we all have different gifts, talents, and passions. So not everyone is going to have the same vision. Yours may be completely different than mine, and that's a good thing. We need the body of Christ to function together with all of its members in concert. Your vision may not have anything to do directly with sexual integrity. You may not end up on television. You may be called to more of a behind-the-scenes work. However, whatever it is, you'll like it. That's right. Jesus says, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." And I came so that you might have life abundantly. He doesn't want us to live a life of drudgery, but one in which we can feel alive and excited about what we're doing. That's why he created us all differently. And God is smart. He wants us to do the things we love because he knows we'll have more energy and passion in those areas. Anybody who has kids can tell you what a joy it is to see them doing what they love. So pay close attention to the different areas of your life, your family, your community, and your culture. These are the places to look for clues to how to get involved. Ask God for more and more specifics regarding your vision. Take risks to step out in your gifting. Develop your areas of passion and interest in preparation for the opportunities he will bring. My pastor used to say, attempt things so big that unless God is part of them, they're doomed to fail. I say we start living like that as much as we can while we still can. There's too much at stake, like the people suffering around us and our own recovery continuing to grow and bear fruit. Well, I hope this helps you and it brings you hope. Remember, developing your own redemptive vision involves allowing God to use your past to bless people in your present and future using your gifts, talents, and passions. So, seek God's heart for your vision and take some risks. And don't forget, if thousands of people in recovery like me can live in victory with God's help and the help of other warriors, so can you, my friend. Until next time, I'm Jason Graves with tips for hope and healing for Pure Passion Television.
When a temptation hits me now, I do two things. I remember what the inevitable results have always been, the misery, the pain, the sadness, and not just for me, but those around me as well. And I also remember and I think about what God has laid before me. If I move in obedience, I have an opportunity to swim deeply into the mystery of God's goodness as he lays it before me. I have the opportunity to become a part of eternal love and to experience it play out in my life, even that day at that moment. But if I sin, which I so often do, I have the opportunity of confession. But as I confess my faults and all my foibles and all my sinfulness, God has moved me and redirected me back into that opportunity of goodness and love.
You see, that boy or girl in the pornographic film or picture that you lust over is a deeply wounded individual. People don't take their clothes off and perform sexual acts for a camera for no reason. They don't allow themselves to be sexually abused in horrific ways for a porn film director because they enjoy it. Odds are great that they've been sexually abused as children, perhaps physically abused in other ways, and often emotionally abused in ways that you can't even imagine a child being able to survive. They've been softened up for your viewing pleasure. In one way or another, they've been made to believe that they've little value or worth other than to feed your lust. And so they hate themselves. In very high numbers, they kill themselves. They shoot drugs and shots of alcohol like sailors just to forget the feelings of worthlessness that others have imparted to them. They cry rivers of tears at night and in the day put on a happy face so that others won't be frightened by the intense pain that dominates their every waking hour. I'm so grateful for David Zahler and others who have been on our show telling us the truth about the porn industry and about what porn does to everyone it touches. And what an example of God's willingness to reach out to anyone who is willing to reach up to him. Whether you're a porn maker, a porn actor, or a porn user, Jesus Christ wants to rescue you and take you away from all the self-hatred, degradation, and damnation that surrounds the evil empire of pornography. You see, he died to pay the penalty for your sin, whatever it's been, and he offers you this day freedom and forgiveness from all unrighteousness. Why, in a few weeks, you won't even recognize yourself. It's an offer you really shouldn't refuse. So call out to Jesus with a heart committed to permanent freedom from this curse of lust. And come back next week and visit us here at Pure Passion.